Hi, it's Louisa Dahl. And welcome to the Interactive Minds podcast, where I talk with passionate marketers, innovators, and digital leaders about their specific recipes for success. In today's show, I interview Simon Jackson talking about how Coca-Cola use social media. Here's 3 things you're going to learn. 1, how the social media team keep their fingers on the pulse and share their learnings. 2, how Coca-Cola used TikTok as part of a recent campaign. And 3, you'll hear Simon's key learnings and advice for you if you're considering using TikTok as well. Let's get into it. Today I'm here with Simon Jackson, who is the Senior Social Creative at Coca-Cola South Pacific. I met Simon recently when he spoke at Interactive Minds seminar in Sydney, and it's great to have you on the show today, Simon. Welcome.
Hey, Louisa. Thanks so much for having me on today. Super excited to be here.
It's great to have you here. Now, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. Should I go all the way back?
As far back as you think's relevant would be fine.
So I started studying a degree which a lot of people think is actually a fake degree in uni. I went to the University of Wollongong and I studied a degree called Internet Science.
Nice.
Which does sound like a bit of an interesting one. And it was the first year that they actually had the degree. And what that was is it was a bit of computer programming, but also marketing.
Yeah.
But it was more a kind of, I guess, 21st century take on marketing and learning the ways in which people were starting to use the internet to market. So it was a really interesting degree, and I ended up going more heavily down that internet marketing kind of route. And then I did a master's of PR and advertising at UNSW.
Yep.
And that's when I did a course in creative advertising, and I was also interning at Leo Burnett, which is an advertising agency in Sydney. And that's when I really found my kind of passion for creative advertising.
Perfect.
And from there, I kind of did award school, which for those who don't know is kind of a school for people who want to get into the creative industry and advertising.
Yep.
And typically you are a copywriter or an art director. I am probably more on the copy side of things, although we are kind of, I think, seeing a shift now more towards the idea of a 360 creative, because everyone can kind of do everything these days. You find a lot more copywriters who've got a good eye and a lot of kind of art directors who can write great copy. So
yeah, right.
I think that classic kind of identification of a creative is really evolving.
And you specialise in social in your current role. Was that the case all along, or was that something that evolved throughout the roles you were in?
So it actually just kind of happened by pure chance, actually. When I was starting out in my career, I kind of ended up doing a lot of the social work and a lot of the social creative because it was typically the last thing on the list. You know, it was all about what's the big idea, what's the campaign, and making sure that we were doing everything we needed to do strategically. And then social was a bit more of an afterthought. And as I've gone on in my career, that has slowly changed to the point where we're really creating our own social strategies these days, and have a really strong focus on social, to the point where I actually work on a specialized team within Coca-Cola called the Social Center, the Coca-Cola Social Center.
Awesome.
And our entire focus is actually on creating best-in-class social creative.
Excellent. So tell me more about what your current role involves then.
Sure thing. So I work in a team of 7 people, and while I'm kind of the lead creative in the team, I think everybody really does a bit of everything. People tend to wear a lot of different hats. So, of course, we've got some social media managers and accounts people, some kind of more production focused creatives.
Yep.
But everybody tends to do a bit of everything.
Mm.
And we're a very agile kind of team. So I guess if you want to look at my typical day, I'd say probably 2 to 3 times a week, we're meeting first thing in the morning and discussing what's actually going on in the news.
Right.
And culture as well. So news, culture, even just what's happening on Instagram. What are people talking about?
Awesome.
And finding out what are the trending memes, what's making people laugh, what's making people cry.
Excellent.
And then from there, really trying to understand whether or not any of our brands has an authentic role to play in joining that conversation. Because it's a lot easier, I think, for brands to join conversations than it is to start them.
Yes.
Because people generally don't want to hear from brands.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And how many brands are there that you're representing?
Oh God, there's quite a lot. So the Coca-Cola family, I need to check my numbers on exactly how many there actually are at the moment.
Yeah.
But between Coca-Cola and CCA, there's dozens of brands actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
And every single brand has its own identity. They kind of cater to slightly different audiences. They've got a slightly different social tone of voice. There's things they would say, things they wouldn't say. And it's really important for us to understand those brands fully to judge whether or not they have a place joining conversations that are happening.
Yeah, fantastic. And sorry, I interrupted you there. You were taking us through your typical day, so I'll let you continue beyond that, that first startup part.
And so at that point, the coffee kicks in and the ideas start flowing. So as I said, we kind of discuss within our team what's happening in news and culture. And from there, we try to find out, which one of our brands has an opportunity. And some days it doesn't work. Some days you don't, there's nothing. At the moment, obviously, there's really terrible news about bushfires. And that's just not a space that any of our brands would really play in. Especially, as a public-facing piece of communications, it's not the right thing to do. I don't think for any brand, but definitely not for our brands. And then so after we've had that kind of start to the day, typically we'll do everything from ideating, presenting. We work with a lot of other creative agencies and also third-party production houses.
Yep.
So at any given time, there can be 5, 6, 7 projects going at once for all different brands.
Yes.
And all of these projects are at different stages. So, we'll be presenting the initial thought starters for one brand while we're finishing off the work on another brand. And so there's a lot going on and there's a lot to keep on top of. But I think it's a very all-encompassing type of role, and I think something about Coca-Cola specifically that people forget is just how many brands actually fall under the Coca-Cola umbrella. So whether it's Coke, Sprite, Fanta, Mount Franklin, there's an endless number of brands. NutriBoost, Barista Brothers, so it is a lot to keep on top of. And that's why it's so crucial that we are a very agile team.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like a great role that you're in, and that you get to not only keep your finger on the pulse, but then be instrumental in designing and defining the creative for many brands, which sounds like a lot of fun. I imagine that the time pressure is on for these types of campaigns as well. What kind of turnaround would you typically have from, defining an idea to getting something live?
Sure. So it's actually a very interesting one, because if you looked at the kind of cycle of Coca-Cola's campaigns, they're very, very long. Some of them can take almost an entire year.
Right.
But that's actually encompassing the entire campaign. We're talking about building the strategy, and everything at every stage gets challenged by everyone.
Yeah.
So by the time we actually release something to market, it's gone through a lot of scrutiny. But if we're talking about how we work as the social center specifically, what often happens is, a larger strategy, depending on the project, of course, and potentially other elements to the campaign, above the line elements to the campaign, will have already been kind of signed off. So whether that's an out-of-home campaign, or a fully integrated campaign, or just a TV commercial.
Yeah.
And often, we'll get the beginnings of what that idea is, or an initial script, and we have often a very quick turnaround into building that into a social concept. Yeah. Sometimes it can be just a couple of days by the time we're presenting back. And then in terms of production, we're always trying to create efficiencies wherever we can. I think it doesn't make sense to be paying to create new assets all the time. So it's about thinking about how can we use what we've already got, or how can we create production efficiencies, for example, on a TV shoot, where we'll go in and shoot social content on the side to create campaign consistency, and also production efficiencies as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess in a long-winded way, it can take a very long time, or we can also equally turn something around if it's a reactive piece of content within 4 hours, as quickly as that.
Yeah, great. And I imagine the content that you're doing therefore is a mix of that kind of longer term campaign stuff where you're on the lookout for opportunities to, leverage for an existing campaign versus that reactive content that might be separate to your campaigns, but you see an opportunity to leverage. Is that about right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think both are equally important. I don't think brands should be investing totally in, large, longer campaigns. And I don't think they should totally be investing in reactive content. They both serve their place in building memory structures within customers for your brand. Yeah,
that's right. And what does your social mix look like? Obviously, we're talking across a lot of brands here, but broadly speaking, what are your kind of core channels? Can you give us any idea of how you focus on those?
Sure thing. So obviously, as you said, it depends very heavily from brand and also what the campaign objective is. So whether it's at the moment, you'll notice one of the biggest campaigns we've got out is Share a Coke.
Yep.
And there's multiple facets to that campaign. So when we initially launched, it's asking yourself, well, how do we let everyone know that Share a Coke is back? But also we need to let people know that, anyone can find their name on a bottle. And there's also a e-commerce aspect where you can get a personalized bottle with any name on it.
Yep.
So, trying to create an asset which is going to drive people to purchase a custom Coca-Cola bottle is very different to telling people about how the campaign is back, both in terms of creative, the platforms that we might potentially use, all the types of placements that we might use.
Yep.
So obviously with the e-commerce stuff, we're going to be using more ads that are going to click through to the website, because that's what we want people to do. We want to drive traffic to the website.
Yep.
Whereas other assets might have a different campaign objective. And one of the biggest challenges that we have is, for a longer campaign, is how do you actually keep people engaged? How do you keep the campaign fresh and new when it's been out for 6 months?
Yeah.
After you figure out that, I know Share a Coke is back, but how do you get people still excited in month 4 and month 5? And that's definitely one of the challenges we have. So I don't know if I've properly answered you, but I guess we use a bit of everything.
Yeah.
We probably don't use Twitter and LinkedIn as much. Like, we're primarily using Facebook and Instagram.
Yep.
But we do use channels like Twitter or LinkedIn, for example, when we've got a corporate communications campaign out.
Yeah.
So it's about understanding who the audience is, who you're trying to reach, and what the best platform is for that. And one other thing, if you don't mind me rambling for a little bit longer, is really about understanding what each platform can offer. So something that we often do is, if we know we're building an Instagram story, we look at what are the features on Instagram story. How are people experiencing that channel? So are people using stickers, for example? And then sometimes that helps us to inform the types of creative that we create.
Yeah, great. How do you stay abreast of the changes and functionality? Because obviously this is a pretty fast-moving area where there's things being released all the time. Is it from simply being in there all the time that you're seeing this, or are there other ways that you try and keep your finger on the pulse for this?
Yeah, sure. So it is moving at the speed of light, literally. There seems to be a new kind of feature every single day with platforms like Snapchat and Instagram competing so heavily. It seems like they're always trying to outdo each other, do something new, do something cool. And as marketers, it can be very difficult to stay on top of that. So, one way is just to subscribe to a whole bunch of blogs.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, and I do that. So I just get those annoying kind of spammy emails every day, but it takes 2 seconds to scroll through those, and if there's anything that captures your attention, then you go and read about it further, and if not, you move on. And then on top of that, internally we kind of do a monthly social media wrap up at the end of every month, and that's something where every person takes a different platform and then they share with the wider group what's been the updates in the last month, and we'll also include some best-in-class creative, what other people are doing that's really interesting.
Awesome.
And I guess that's how we stay on top of everything.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense, doesn't it? To share and leverage amongst the team those learnings and insights that you're getting along the way. And it sounds like you've got a couple of ways that are built into the structure in order to enable that.
Yeah, and I think in the same way that our reactive content meetings are, not very much time, that is something that really doesn't take a lot of time, especially if you do it once a month. You gather all the most interesting platform updates, put it into a deck and circulate that around.
Yeah.
And there's Google is your friend. There's no shortage of websites that already just do that and have the updates. It's just about making sure you stay on top of them.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I realize that a lot of them can be quite tedious and boring, and they happen so often. But just keep an eye on it, I guess.
Yeah.
And when something interesting comes out, note it down. And the other thing that I would say is just spend time playing with it. I know a lot of us are already on Facebook and Instagram, but how many people out there have actually downloaded TikTok and played around with it, or Snapchat? Even if none of your friends actually use the platform, go on it and play with it, and that's the best way, I think, to understand it.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I think it's something that all marketers should be doing, whether they're focusing on social or otherwise. It's really important to stay up to date with the opportunities and how these platforms are being used. And I think we all see, even from a user experience perspective, in the apps themselves, how much that's changing and evolving, and that will, I guess, flow through to other areas as well.
That's it.
So you've recently worked on a TikTok campaign. Can you tell us a little bit about what was involved with this, and take us through it?
Sure thing. So I guess Fanta, not many people know, but Fanta's been around for a really long time. And the audience has always tended to be younger adults. And Fanta as a brand is really about, people coming together, having a fun time, kind of just letting down your hair, being who you are. And I think we needed a way to figure out how we were going to talk to the next generation of young adults,
Mm.
and find out how Fanta could really be relevant and talk to them in a way that didn't seem like, your grandpa trying to like tell you about all the great times that you can have.
Yep.
Because that's not really cool.
Yeah. So what did you come up with?
And so what we discovered actually was, looking deeper into TikTok, is that rather than talking to Gen Z, you really need to give them the tools to experience a brand for themselves.
Yeah.
They're, I think, as a generation, happy to try and fail, but they want to do things themselves.
Mm.
And I also think that they're one of the most creative generations in a long time.
Yeah.
And part of that, or rather, I guess we're just seeing it more. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're just as creative as we were, but they've got more tools to show off their creativity.
Yes. It's more public.
That's probably more correct. Because we were creative, right?
Yeah, totally. Still are.
Still are. But I think they really are interested in expressing themselves. And there's been a lot of research done around how they like to express their creativity.
Do you know what? Just to add in here, I think they also have the confidence. I think these platforms not only allow them to express it, but they, on the whole, seem hugely confident to put themselves out there and show you the world.
I 100% agree with you. I was talking, we were talking about TikTok in a meeting room the other day, and some people in the team who were millennials were just saying they would never do it. They would feel so embarrassed doing it. And I can't believe that these people are just putting themselves out there unashamedly.
That's it.
And so when we kind of saw that as an audience insight, we thought it aligned very well with what Fanta stands for. As I said, like Fanta is all about collective fun. And simultaneously, we had also released the new campaign for Fanta, which is all about being bold.
Okay.
And so I think that just lent itself perfectly. Like we were reading what TikTok was all about, and it just sounded like it was an absolutely perfect fit, as if it was made for Fanta.
Yep.
Which obviously works very well, and I don't necessarily think that all brands can say that they're meant for that.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. I think a lot of brands are going, TikTok's the newest thing. Like we should be on TikTok. We should be on TikTok. Well, I think you should actually be thinking about what's right for your brand. Like who's your audience? What's your message? What are you trying to say? And then from there, start figuring out whether or not TikTok is the right place to say it.
Definitely.
And so, yeah, I guess knowing that our long-term kind of strategy is to build that association between Fanta and Halloween, given that that's a time when younger people are dressing up, and it's a night to have fun, really. It's an occasion to have fun.
Yep.
And so I think we saw that as a really, really great opportunity. And I will say, like, there was a lot of learnings with TikTok because it was a very new platform. In fact, this was the first FMCG campaign in Australia to do a TikTok brand challenge.
Wow.
So it was very new, not only for us, but for TikTok itself. So it was a little bit of a risk.
Yeah.
And definitely take our hats off to the brand managers who were willing to take that calculated risk. I'll say calculated risk.
Yeah.
And come along the journey with us. And so we did a lot of research about what actually makes an effective TikTok campaign. And one of the things that came about was having this low barrier to entry. So how could we make a challenge so simple that anyone could do it? So when we were coming up with the TikTok campaign, we realized that we needed to have a really low barrier to entry. And that's why so many people are entering these TikTok challenges, because anyone who's got a phone can basically make a TikTok.
Yep.
And they can do something that's really creative using a lot of the tools that are on the platform.
Cool.
It really gives TikTokers the opportunity to be creative using the platform's tools. And so one of the other kind of insights we found around Halloween was that people loved making their own costumes.
Nice.
And this idea of going to the store and spending like $100 on a witch costume has, slowed down a little bit.
Yeah.
And to be fair, that's probably what, a lot of people still do. But I think people are leaning more towards creating interesting, creative costumes that are taken out of pop culture. I mean, I think the amount of people that would have dressed up as Donald Trump, for instance, this year would have been through the roof, or as Fortnite characters, or as, anything from pop culture.
Definitely.
I think we were seeing a massive growth in that. So we wanted to really make sure that people could enter this challenge with a really, really low barrier, as I said. So we created this idea of the costume cauldron.
Okay.
Which essentially meant that people would throw a bunch of things into the cauldron that were to make up their costume.
Yep.
And then do a reveal to show off their DIY Halloween costume.
Awesome.
And the reason why we did kind of a reveal was purely because, speaking to TikTok, they said that was one of the most effective ways to do a challenge. And the most TikTok videos use some sort of reveal.
Yep.
And so we wanted that to really be part of our challenge. And the best thing about the costume cauldron is that, as I said, like, you can put anything in it. Your cauldron can be anything. There was people who were throwing in, onions and makeup into their own cooking pots at home, and that was their cauldron.
Yeah.
There's people just using baskets that they found in their house. So, wherever you were, you could easily have participated in the challenge. And of course, some people went, to the extremes, and dressed up in amazing costumes. But what we found was that people were really taking the time to make an amazing video because it was done by a brand. And I think that's the fear that a lot of brands have, that, people are going to be scared off by a brand creating a challenge. But on TikTok, more people are actually interested in doing branded challenges because it's an opportunity for them to show off their creativity, and they know it's going to be seen by a big brand. So they really look at it as an opportunity for them. So we found that so many people were entering. I think in the end we had something like using the hashtag, there was like 18,000 entries. Wow. I think Fanta specific entries, I can't remember how many were there, but there was a couple of thousand. And just, I think what's most important is the time spent with the brand. So unlike a 6-second ad that you're creating elsewhere, people are not just creating videos, but they're also spending minutes upon minutes watching everyone else's awesome videos.
Yeah. And,
there's people dressing up as Fanta cans. So, it was absolutely ridiculous. There's people, going to incredible lengths to paint their faces orange and glue the Fanta logo on themselves. It was crazy. And it was very, very cool to see. And it's definitely an advertising experience that I haven't seen before.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, the time that people spent with the brand was absolutely massive. In the end, the campaign challenge had 80 million views.
Wow.
And it maybe even has more now. I mean, that's the last time I checked it. It could be more now.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
Even after the challenge is over, the hashtag still remains there. So there's still people going back and looking at the campaign and checking out all the amazing content. So we created the challenge, and then we also partnered with several influencers, but specifically TikTok influencers.
Okay.
which is really interesting because that sounds like a bit of a weird thing to say, TikTok influencers, but they do exist.
Yeah.
And they've got very big followings.
Yes. That's funny. My kids were talking to me the other day about their cousin being TikTok famous. And my kids are not on TikTok because they're way too young. But the fact that they even heard that phrase, their cousin is not TikTok famous, but the fact that they've heard that phrase and, are aware of it, I was like, yeah, no, he's got like 80 followers. That's not it.
I don't know if that's famous. Hey, it could be famous.
Well,
for him or for her.
Yeah, that's right. What's a TikTok influencer kind of defined by? Like, is there a number that you're looking for there, or is it reach? What do you measure?
So I think, it's obviously a very new space. So I won't pretend to be an expert on judging TikTok influencers.
Yeah.
But a big one for me is actually just the level of content that they create.
Yeah. Right.
So I think the one thing on TikTok is that it's not just fueled by big numbers. I think often the people who have the biggest followings are often, actually at the moment anyways, the best content creators. And the way that I think the TikTok algorithm works is that it actually does kind of hero the best creative. It's not just about those big followings.
Yeah.
So
makes sense.
That is the cool thing about the platform, that even if you've got 0 followers, if you create a really awesome video, people will find you.
Yeah.
And your video will get noticed. So that's why we really try to find people who create great content. And then of course, we use people who were well known on TikTok. One person in particular who's very, very famous, one of the biggest TikTokers, is the Chains family.
Okay.
And it's a guy called Ricky who actually uses his grandma in every video. And she is so cute and so funny. And he actually dressed her up as a Fanta can.
That's great.
Which is absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
And she was obviously very willing to do it and had a great time. So I think it is about numbers, but it ultimately it is about having a high level of content. And I think you're starting to see more and more TikTok influencers emerge. But it will be very interesting to see how things pan out in the next year or two.
Yeah. This sounds like it was a pretty well thought out and researched campaign. How far in advance were you putting together this campaign?
Well, we know we had a really successful campaign last year for Fanta Halloween.
Yep.
So as early as January, February, we were already starting to think about what we could do.
Yeah, right.
And it just so happened that TikTok had started allowing brands to create challenges, I think only in about July, August, around then in Australia.
Yeah.
So that's why, as soon as we heard of that news, we were like, okay, this is a really big opportunity. Maybe we should be jumping on this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's when we started to look into it a little bit more. Because it was such a new platform, there was a lot of back and forth and umming and ahhing and questioning ourselves. And, we must have created, 10 different challenge ideas.
Yep.
Before we landed on the one that we did.
Yeah. And that's not a lot of time either.
A lot of work.
Yeah.
No. And then you got to think about the fact that we actually started the campaign a little bit early because we wanted it to be fully ready right before Halloween.
Yeah, of course.
And so before then, you've actually got to have all the influencer videos, everything else done, all the campaign creative done quite far in advance, almost a month before that even starts. So if you look at the time from when we knew we could do TikTok to when we actually delivered it, it's a very small time window.
Yeah. With the influencers, I'm not super familiar with TikTok influencers. So can you give us a quick overview of what that engagement looked like, I suppose, with them? What did they kind of deliver for you amongst that period of time?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think, again, we were quite weary of only using TikTok. So we actually tried to find people who also had some sort of presence on Instagram.
Yep.
And what we found was that a lot of the influencers did actually either already have that Instagram following and then created TikTok accounts, or
Right.
created TikTok accounts and then off the back of that created Instagram accounts and shared all their content.
Yep.
So all of a sudden you start reaching more and more people.
Great.
So what we were actually doing was is not only did they create videos for us on TikTok, but they also created Instagram content for us.
Excellent.
That encouraged people on other platforms to join in on the challenge. So we had, Instagram stories that were encouraging people to swipe up and join the challenge on TikTok. So
Cool.
It was really important for us to use a combination of different platforms to make this campaign as big as possible.
So they then promoted it in advance, let people know about the challenge, and then I presume also then took part kind of around the time that you were getting, well, around Halloween.
Yeah, so when you have a TikTok challenge, you can actually have a number of what they call official entrants.
Okay.
And so they basically you get 6 to 9, or you get a few videos which you can pin to the top of the challenge.
Yep.
So anytime somebody comes to view that challenge, they will at least see those videos,
Yeah, great.
which is obviously what you want because those are the best videos.
Yeah.
So people get to the challenge, they see all these amazing videos, they get inspired, and then hopefully create a video of their own.
Awesome. Cool. So this was obviously a fairly recent campaign and you've shared some of the results with us. What were your key learnings in using this platform in this way? And is there anything you'd do differently next time?
Yeah, sure. Plenty of learnings. There's always learnings. If you haven't learned anything, then you've failed.
Yep.
But I think, again, I would go back to what I was talking to before about the barriers to entry. I think it's really important to create a campaign that is as simple as possible. If you have too many elements, it's just hard. It's difficult to do.
Yeah.
I would also say have a look at what people are doing on the platform. So, on TikTok, for example, dance challenges are really, really big.
Yep.
And in the end, we were thinking about doing one, but we decided against it. But have a look at what kind of videos people are making, what's trending on TikTok, because I can tell you that it's not the same as other platforms. It is different.
Yeah.
It's a whole new world. TikTok is.
It is.
I would also say think about how you can leverage those different platforms as effectively as possible.
Yep.
How you can make the campaign even bigger. And I think the toughest challenge with TikTok is finding an authentic way to put your product or your brand at the center of it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think what we found was naturally that ended up kind of happening. As I said, people dressed up as Fanta cans. But think about, is there a way that you can actually have your product or brand at the center of the challenge in a way that feels natural? So I would definitely be thinking about that.
Yeah, and that was an interesting aspect, I suppose, because I guess it's not necessarily the most obvious one to think that someone's going to dress up as your product. So I imagine you considered quite a few different options as well.
Definitely, and that was, I think, one of the scariest things from a brand perspective. It's like, well, you're putting out a campaign out there that is a branded challenge, but doesn't inherently ask anyone to actually use the product in order to take part of it. So there was every risk that people were just going to create costumes and it wouldn't have anything to do with Fanta.
Yeah.
But that's again why it's so important to not only choose the right influencers who have worked with brands before, but also to have a look at what kind of example they're setting for everyone else. So as I said, like Ricky for example, turned his grandma into the Fanta can,
Yeah.
which I'm sure is, was at least part of the reason why other people were inspired to dress up as Fanta cans.
Yeah.
So I'd really think about what that influencer content is, because that's the content that's going to be viewed by everyone else.
Awesome. And have you kind of tracked correlation from this campaign back to sales, or how far are you concerned about that element of it?
So that's obviously very important. I mean, I think a lot of people will say that. They'll go, yeah, it's all good. You created, you got 80 million people viewing your brand, but how many bottles of Fanta did you sell?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that is what some people care about. I think at this stage, we can't say exactly,
Sure.
what sales it actually correlated with. However, we can say that as a wider campaign, there definitely was a sales uplift.
Excellent.
For sure, and quite a substantial one in October during the time of the campaign.
Good.
So obviously some is with regards to the campaign as a whole and other elements of the campaign. Some would be the TikTok. But I think, again, that's why it's important to not only just consider using one channel, but to figure out how all the channels can coherently work together to create a good result for your business.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that's, it's a really important element to make sure we cover off on, because I think, these social campaigns sound heaps of fun and get some great engagement in your case. But it is important to tie it back to, I guess, the business objective at the end of the day and make sure there's correlation there as well. So that's awesome. Well done.
Awesome.
Well, I know we have to wrap this up shortly. If I've got one more question for you before you go. I know on this show we have a bit of interest in understanding how people in the industry are managing their time, their priorities, their calendar and their inbox. Do you have any specific ways that you manage these areas of your day-to-day?
Well, I'm not sure how many other creatives you speak to on the podcast, but I'm probably a lot worse than some of the other people that you've spoken to.
There's no good and bad. Everyone does it their own way, which I think is just interesting to uncover.
Yeah. So I would say one bad tendency, which I have, is I'm a bit OCD about answering emails.
Yep.
I really hate having a full inbox, to the point where sometimes I just need to close my email program entirely so I don't see them.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it just drives me mad.
Fair enough.
However, there is one kind of thing I do which helps me quite a bit. So at the start of every week, I know what jobs I'm going to be working on.
Yep.
And I'm very lucky that one of the lead members of my team kind of helps us set up, I guess, a rough skeleton for what the week is going to look like.
Yep.
And to the point of breaking down each day, what is the best thing to be working on.
Awesome.
And then using that as kind of a guide, I guess we figure out how we prioritize our own work.
Great. Yeah, I think that's really important, isn't it? Having that focus and knowing the one thing that we need to move the dial on each day.
Yeah, and then I think that the last thing about that is probably just everybody knows themselves and everybody works differently. So, for me, I know that taking out, half an hour sometimes at lunch to go outside and get some fresh air and clear my mind, sometimes do some exercise, really helps me feel recharged. And also I'm best, I know that my best creative work, weirdly, is done at about like 10 a.m.
Yep.
So I will save my first hour of the day sometimes getting through some admin if I need to, and then when my brain is fully woken up and I'm in that ready to go, that's when I'll work on my creative work. So it's really about knowing yourself and knowing the times when you can give the best of yourself to different jobs, and just figuring out your schedule that way. That's how I do it, I guess.
Fantastic. I love it. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It's been a real pleasure hearing about some of the work that you've been doing in this space. And thank you so much for sharing so many great tips with us. If someone wants to reach out to you after hearing this, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me. It's been awesome. You can reach me on LinkedIn. Yep. My name is Simon Jackson. I think my handle is Simon Jackson AU, all one word. Otherwise, you can catch me on Twitter at Simon4VP. That's Simon for the number VP.
Excellent. Great. We will add those in the show notes as well. Thanks for being part of it. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Thanks so much, Louisa.
Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, please remember to subscribe. My recommended action item from today's show is to try out TikTok if you haven't already. And think about how you're sharing learnings amongst your team on a regular basis. Please join me in the Interactive Minds Facebook group, where hundreds of marketers have discussions, answer questions, and I share the latest news I'm seeing in the industry. You can access today's show notes at interactiveminds.com/podcast. See you next week.